Let's turn that down a little bit, and yep, definitely live. Alright. So today I will be working on a shitload of scions, and I'm also going to be doing up a test miniature for my Admech. Now this one's mostly will be me fiddling around with a colour scheme to figure out what works. Anyway, let's get started. So as per my usual method, I'll work from the outside in, and in the case of Admech, he's got this whopping great greatcoat. Say that 3 times real fast. So we want to get that coloured in, and all of the trousers and material in there before we actually work out to the miniature. So let's get that started. Remember to keep everything in frame as best I can at any rate. Okay. Okay, that'll do for an initial coat. Colours have mixed together a little bit, that's fine. So what I'm going to do with this guy is I'm aiming to do a lot more painted metal that I'm going to chip and scuff with my Vallejo Air Metallics later on. So I did try something like that with my GW paints with my last batch of Orc projects, but that didn't really work out. So I'm going to be a bit more experimental still. For now I just want to get some colours laid down. Okay, I think that'll do. Actually, while I'm at it, I should probably base coat the entire model, because if we're going to do a wash eventually, yeah. So, actually, while I'm here, let's quickly pull up a reference. So his bodysuit, I guess, appears to be of all one colour, which is perfect for our purposes. And just make it a nice reddy brown. In this case, Mornfang brown. I'm also currently, if you care, using my crappy brushes right now. It's mostly 40k, I don't really, and also base coating, so I don't need precision just yet. Alright, that's good. So yeah, as you can see, I'm not worrying too much about being neat at this stage. The important part is just getting the base colours down on the model. Start refining things once I have a better idea of what colour everything is going to be. And once at the very least the initial base coats have dried. Just make sure I'm not putting it on too thick there. Ah, damn it. Oh well, that's what second and third passes are for. Just mostly trying to work the colour into the recesses right now. Alright, I think I'll leave that to dry. That'll be our first wave of colour. I suppose while I'm here, let's have a look at the other features. So there's a lot of pipes and cabling. I'm just going to be boring and make those black. Well, a lot of them black. Some of them will be metallic. I've got the Admech symbol, but I'll do that very last. Purity seals. So I'll change the red that well actually I won't use red, I'll use purple. Oh, screw me pink, that's a decent enough base. So yeah, I think the rest of the colours are just going to be full metallic outright, more or less. You know, there's plates on the gloves. What are they meant to look like on the reference material? They are metallic, so I'll actually paint those red before I move on. The effect I'm trying to get good at is basically doing painted metal but heavily scuffed. Like you see with lots of actual military equipment, it's usually like standard process is everything is painted with whatever standard, like green camo type colour that is like set as the national standard. And then after years of service and going out in the field, inevitably you get the whatever metallic thing gets scuffed up and scratched, so the original metal comes through. That's the effect I want to replicate with this guy's armor, backpack and stuff like that. I won't be doing it for the weapons though, because doing that for weapons does strike me as somewhat odd. And typically it wasn't really done for weapons, which usually were just blued metal or remained, yeah, just blued metal basically. These are all pipes, so I can leave them. Okay. So, to reiterate, greatcoat is staggered on scale green. I need to find the highlight and shade for that. Okay, those two I need to find highlights and shades for. Everything else is already out. Yeah, the trousers and bodysuit are Mornfang brown. That's already brown. And the armor bits are Mephiston red. A lot of the pipes and stuff are going to be black. I've already got the highlights for those out, so let's go digging through my paint box. Oh. Right. Caliban green, Sotek green, and Temple Guard blue. Alright. Ow! Sorry, my back is a little sore from pump. That is Sotek green. I'm pretty sure I have Temple Guard blue in here somewhere. There it is. Too easy. Alright, so... What was the other colour I needed? Scream pink. Okay. Pink Horror and Emperor's Children. Well, there's Pink Horror, and I don't think I have Emperor's Children, so that'll do. So yeah, it's all too easy. He can sit back and dry for a bit. So, now we can start being a bit neater. I'm just going to grab some more precise brushes for this. Actually, there's an armor plate in there, so you'd want to go back over that with a red at some point. Okay. So now I'm just trying to be well, slightly neater at this point. Just try and ensure you neatly hit all of the colours and try not to spill over now. There's little valves and stuff as well which need to be covered as well. And some knee pads. Okay. Right, looking good. Now I'm going to go back over the inside of the cloak again. So this time we'll just, can't really see it from the camera's point of view. Okay, and honestly, yeah, let's just tap a bit of paint onto the more exposed surfaces on the back side of the cloak. And I think that's pretty much good. Now I am going to be relying heavily on washes to bring out a lot of the shade and a lot of the demarcation between the various bits on the cloak. So yeah, at this stage the important thing is just to start getting all of your colours neatly blocked in. Okay, so that is that done. Now do the other bits of exposed bodysuit. Now this time trying to be a bit more careful, not stray over the lines. Okay, this brush is a little munted, so let's go a bit more precise. I'm basically using some very, very destroyed Winsor & Newtons for this. While I still hold a tip to some degree, I definitely wouldn't want to use them for any real work anymore, any precision work anymore. Okay. Alright, that is that. Let's do some more red. Okay. So that's a little bit over the line there. Okay. Starting to cover well. I think the shoulder pads need another brief pass, and then there's some more spot details which I need to hit. Alright, that's good. Okay. Now, the bodysuit does contain a lot of, like with the trouser parts, a lot of valves and what look like hose ports, so I'll just hit those with the red as well. Okay. And no others that are visible or easily accessible, so that's fine. I'll clean up the surface of the cloak, or the greatcoat, rather, to be accurate. A bit of red there when I shouldn't have. Yep, this is why you be careful, because I've just got some of the green where it shouldn't have gone. But if you notice it soon enough, it's easy enough to clean up. All you need to do is just wet your brush with pure water and just dab it over the affected surface until you wash the paint away. Okay, also I'm going to remember to get the underside of the cloak like this, just so we've got a continuous colour. Alright, so now the sleeves. Just be careful running up against the other colours at this point. Oh, yep. There's some parts of the armour I've missed there. Gonna have to go back over it. Okay. That's good. To remember, I also have tea next to me, which is rapidly going cold. So it's started to get a bit neater now, which is fine. That's fine. The idea is you start messy, then refine your accuracy until you're ready to do some serious detailing. At least that's my standard method for painting. I'll just quickly go back and touch up a few parts that have colour where they shouldn't. Yep, I made a mess of it there. But no worries, we'll just, once that's fully dry, we'll go back over it. So, in the meantime... Well... Yeah, let's do the black. Just trying to make sure my brushes are at least somewhat clean. Also, note to self, go out and buy more of Mephiston Red. Actually, might take a break around midday and go do that. I have to get to Bunnings as well, for other reasons. So I'm also not sitting at my painting desk for the entire day. That's not great. Alright. There's a bit of red in there, which shouldn't be, so let's just clean that up. Wonderful. Okay. So, Any other black cabling? A couple of bits and pieces there. Alright, so back to neatening up. Just make sure we got the colour properly demarcated around there. And the back's fine. Oh, most of that's going to get shaded heavily with wash anyway, so I'm not going to worry too much about it. Alright, it's coming along. So let's have a think about some metallics now. My gold standard is pretty much pale burnt metal. Pale burnt metal from Vallejo Metal Air, basically. Now these are the best metallic paints on the market. They really do look like metal. So if you follow me on either Tumblr or Instagram and you've seen my take on Steelheart's Champions, all the metallics on that were done with those colours. Which, yeah, they seriously do look like actual metal. Anyway, other base colours, I suppose. So there's a couple of purity seals. Actually, let's switch down to a smaller size brush for that. Here's another one. Might go back over with the Stegodon Scale Green to neaten it up afterwards. Yeah, I should, because there's also a bit of a patch on the cloak which still looks a bit red. Okay, looking good so far. I suppose while I'm working, I'll also talk about the general process that I'll take for metallics. So this color is going to be my base metallic. And that's, when I say base, it's the metallic for everything that'll go on first. Like even the parts which are going to be gold and brass, I'll be going over with this first. Because I find, for most metallic colours, it's best to actually start off with a base colour and then work your way up to the true colour. Like then I'll be using copper for a few bits, probably some of the trim. And you know, more metallic bits. Gold, and then I'll be highlighting it with, well, that's another pale burnt metal that is not almost empty, which is useful for me. I'll probably use either chrome or, no, it's a bit too dark. Either chrome or aluminium as my edge highlight, and also for scratching and pitting the armor, but those can wait for a bit. I'm not going to get to those for a while. maybe even I won't get to them today, who knows. Alright, back to Screamer Pink. I'm just trying to remember that you should actually be watching my painting, not my hands, unless you're into that sort of thing. In which case I'm flattered that you've chosen me. Alright. It's coming along. That's a mistake. That's also a hair. I need to get rid of that. We're just going to quickly reshape the colours to make sure I'm not straying out of bounds. Just reinforce the jacket, or the greatcoat, overall in general, because I think there's still a little bit of the base colour showing through. Well, if you were careful and you're just relying on heavily on your zenithal highlight, that's pretty good, because you're using it to establish shades and highlights already. But I wasn't neat enough for that, so it's no big deal. I'll just go over it. Okay. Now. Brush is too wet. All right. So I think Screamer Pink can use a bit more definition. A bit more colour, rather. There we go. Alright, so I think that's more or less the base coating done for this miniature. So we'll do the metallics later on. Actually, yeah, we'll do the metallics later on in subsequent layers, because they will need a different shade color. So, actually, I'll just leave that out for one moment. And I'll see if in the big box of paint, if I have a spare Mephiston red. Strikes me as one of the colours that I would have spares for, and I do. Excellent. So you can get in the bin. Nah, seems like it shouldn't waste paint. Look, I have a third one that's already opened. I don't have to go out after all. Alright, So. It's just about dry all over. So, that'll be wash time. Now, I'm just going to do an overall of Admech Earthshade, and then I will probably repaint the cloak and do that a separate shade colour, because it's more of a green, not a brown. Now, if you're not familiar with miniature painting, especially for more of the bulk style GW painting, brown is pretty much the universal shade. It shades everything to a reasonable degree, and it certainly does do a good job of making things look dirty on the like as if they've been on the battlefield for a while, which is kind of what you're aiming for. And I screwed up there. I have got some red on his feet. That's not ideal, so quickly just fix that and hope that dries by the time I get back to it. So yeah, brown is pretty much the universal donor when it comes to shading for miniature painting. There's a reason why Admech Earthshade is known as liquid talent to a lot of the GW army painters. It just works in most situations. One thing shades have a tendency to do is pool at the end of surfaces like that. You just want to stop that from happening just by cleaning it up once it starts to settle. So shade isn't really a process of just slapping it on and moving on. You have to go back and make sure it's drying properly as well. Drying in the way you were expecting it to dry. Because if you put it on too thick, it can really pool in ways you don't want, and that are glaringly obvious when it comes time to actually finish the model. That's another mistake. It should be red. Just quickly trying to fix that. It doesn't want to really. It's covered with liquid, oh well. I'll figure out a way around that. So just clean up the shade on that particular part, and we'll remember to come back to it in a minute. That's another purity seal on his feet I missed. It's difficult to get to as well, which is annoying. Anyway. So just have a mostly damp brush, and we're just cleaning up a lot of the excess now. Let's make sure it's not pooling. Okay, it's looking good. Alright, so wait for the... Yeah, that's more or less good. So what we'll do now is we'll wait for the lot to dry, then we'll fix up some of the mistakes, and then... that's a part I missed in there. And then we'll do another smaller wash pass, and then we're good to start layering on some metallics. Alright, so that's what he looks like right now. So we'll get back to him later. Okay, and we're back for round 2. So just went out, had to get some stuff at Bunnings, but other than that, I'm good to go. So, to pick up where we left off, these guys have had their first coat of Mephiston Red all over their armour, and they're fully dried, but I don't feel like batching through them again right now, so instead we're going to focus on our Admech test model here. So to start with, we've already brown shaded all of the things which are needed to be. Now we need to redo the cloak, or the greatcoat rather. I keep on saying that, so I'm just going to simply relayer it, and then move on with my life. Oh, damn it. Okay, looking good. We've re-established our Stegodon scale green on the greatcoat. Just going to leave the very deepest, crevices, the shaded Stegodon, because I cannot be bothered to try and do this perfectly. And I think I've decided I'm going to shade the greatcoat using a significantly different manner from the rest of the model. So we'll do that in a moment once everything is dry. So let's have a quick look at my paint. Cantor blue, that'll do. Alright, so now Cantor blue is a very, very, very purpley dark blue, which is good because it'll act as a natural shade for our greeny blue or Stegodon scale green. But that's... the cloak is still drying, so we'll... Okay, let's do some other work while that's happening. Grab that and get going. So what I'm doing now is I'm relayering some of the previous colours, just to re-establish the main tone. Okay. So far, so good. Okay, I think that's just about good. This needs a couple of touches over there. And that's all you need to do to relayer the red. And right on cue, our Stake It On Stale green is just about dry, so just so you can actually see what's going on a little more effectively, I'm just going to rearrange some elements here. Going to take our green and our blue, get them side by side, and get out our mixing brush of mixing. It's still pretty heavy with red, which is unfortunate. This won't be too big a deal. Anyway, get some green on the palette. Now one part. Another part blue, and we'll blend that into the green. So the colour we should have. Should thin that down quite heavily. There we go. Let's see how this looks. Now, this is me experimenting, so it could be a disaster. The idea is we just start painting it into the recesses and start getting a graduated colour shift. Also the underside and of the sleeves as well. It's barely visible. Let's emphasize the blue a lot more. Okay. Now let's do some quick rearranging. So I can bring in a lot of my tools so they're closer. I'm not entirely sure what to think of this. So starting to get the colour transition happening. And you know what? Since this is very subtle, what I'm going to do is I'm going to get more of a colour shift going. So this is a roughly 50-50 mix. Just going to simply paint it on the lower half of the greatcoat. Also, we're not in the shadow areas. It's pretty dry. So we'll cover a little more ground with it. Because what happens here is we're using the colour at a thin enough consistency so that the overlapping layers will build up the opacity of the Cantor blue. Now honestly, I'm fairly happy with that transition. Once it dries, it'll look very subtle, but it'll be there. But what we ultimately want to do is start emphasizing the shadows a lot more by going pure Cantor blue. You might even have to dim this down a bit by giving it some... I don't have a good purple in the GW range. Actually, let's try Dark Reaper. Or even better yet, Incubi Darkness. I've got that in here somewhere. There we go. Actually, yeah. So if we compare these side by side, actually that's just a grey, that's about the same tone. Not great. What other options do I have? I want to avoid using pure black because that is a way to really really blacken the colour and it would look very stark. I want to try and avoid that if at all possible. The only purple I've really got is Demonette Hide. It's a bit too light, I think. Actually, I wonder what happens if I... Ew, that's a bad pot. Or more accurately, that's an old pot. So, I'll get some Demonette Hide on the palette. Mix it in with some Cantor blue, and what have we got? Actually, let's give it a bit of Stegodon Scale green as well. It's not particularly dark though. Oh well. Alright, let's try going ahead with our pure Cantor blue in the shadows. Now we want to be a bit more precise with this, so go down to a smaller brush. Still using very thin paint. And we will find a lot of the curves and just paint the glaze the colour in as best we can. So there's only a very few curves on the cloak, so I don't want to overdo it. It's a very subtle one there, but I'm not going to do it because I don't think it's significant enough. Again, a lot of the undersides and folds. And we'll continue to build that up slowly. So let's just do a bit there, because that is a bit of a dip. Okay. and also directly in the inner side of the cloak. There we go. I'm pretty happy with that. So all it needs we need to start doing highlights now. So the highlights for Stegodon Scale Green are Temple Guard Blue, I believe. Come on. Got tea, I should actually drink that. So, we'll get a bit of our Stegodon Scale Green. Bit of our Sotek Green. And then we've got our highlight mix. So we're gonna start off with a bit of a larger brush and pick some up. Start making sure it's thin. Oh, excuse me. And we'll identify the spots where the fabric is a little more raised, and we'll start sketching in some highlights. Let's bring that along the cloak. Start getting our edge highlight going. A bit up there. So along there, because that part is flared out a bit, so it's particularly prominent. So just try and get a bit of a colour shift up into it there going. Okay. And I'll hit the upper surfaces of the sleeves as well. And I smudged a bit onto his armour, that will not do. And I flooded the area. Brilliant. Okay, so just make sure we cleaned up. And we're doing alright. Now we'll get some transition going between the highs and the lows. So I'll get the pure Stegodon Scale Green. And I'm going to make sure it's thin, and I'll start just feathering it in between the two, the colour transition, just to try and hide that transition and make it a little less stark in general. Ow. Scritched by the model there for a minute. There we go. Pretty happy with the way this is turning out. Wait, let's reinforce those highlights a bit. Kind of flared it out a bit when I shouldn't have. There. Okay. Probably shouldn't overdo this because I have got an entire kill team worth of these guys to go. But yeah. Okay, so that's pretty good. I'm happy with that. What I'm going to do now is get some pure Sotek green. Let's make it a little thicker so we can get more control out of our edge highlights. And start laying in some of the sharpest highlights. Now, are there any sharp folds in the cloak? Not a lot, but just enough to make it to warrant it here. Here. And here, I think. And I'll finish laying them in. My tablet's beeping at me again. Alright. So that looks good. Actually, I should probably do the sleeves as well, hey. Alright, let's do that. So. Just want to pretty much hit all the sharp edges and the creases. Okay. Cloak is definitely looking good. I'll get to our final highlight. Temple Guard Blue. Now this is our very, very fine highlight. And I'm making a mess everywhere. See, got it on my thumb. So just take it right off my thumb, chuck it on my palette, and clean myself up. Alright, so we'll thin down our highlight just a little bit. We want to keep it relatively thick to try and retain control. We'll just pick some of the sharpest edges. Take this corner here. Just a little wink of it at the top of these creases. And on these little sharp protrusions around the edge of the cloak. To really emphasize where it bulges out and where the light would catch the most. Okay, and one there. And on the sleeves, I'm just pretty much going to go around the top of the sleeve. That would have been a disaster. See that? I almost chucked it right on the back of his backpack. I would have had to clean that all up. And another one. Alright, I'm going to call that done for the highlights on the cloak. Which is good because we've got two of the, well, one of the largest surfaces on the model completely done. So we can, move on to other things, I suppose. I do apologise for my earlier stream where I was just base coating these guys. I think I've learned my lesson. I'll do single miniatures on stream and save my batch work for my own time. So after these guys, I've got Genestealer Cultists coming up. So, Wild Rider Red for our red highlight. Now, since the red is predominantly meant to be a metallic colour, well, not a lot of very sharp differentiation between like various shades. What we're going to do is just stick to a pure edge highlight, like Allied GW style, anyway. Now that's a bit thick, so what we'll do is we'll make sure we've got a small amount on the brush, and we'll just start picking out little rivets on the armor and hitting the edges. Okay, I'm not going to worry too much about getting the feet because they're mostly obscured by cloak anyway. Let's just have a quick squeeze at our quality. Yeah, I should have paid more attention. Focus is off, I think. Okay, that's fine, I guess. Anyway. Just finished off my tea there. Okay, it's starting to look good. Though you can see how fiddly this gets. Okay. Yeah, that's a part I probably should have hit earlier with my layering. So this armor plating at the back of the head. There we go. Excuse me. Let's do the backpack next. Let's make sure it's thin because it's starting to get smear a bit. Those little pouches there, I might do those in a leather colour at some point. So I'm just going to leave them be for now. Just try and get all of the painted metal instead. Or areas that I think should be painted metal. There's also lots of displays and gauges on the back of this thing, so yeah, we can leave a lot of it blank. Because we'll go through and do a lot of it when we get to the detailing stage. We start to pick out individual bits and pieces which are different from the main uniform colours. There appear to be... I screwed that one up. So there appear to be some kind of like straps on the backpack that seem to hold bits and pieces of it in place. I probably should check my reference material before I move on. See whether I'm wasting my time or not highlighting it all. And for these small narrow bits, I'm not going to bother edge highlighting. I'm just going to touch the top part with the highlight colour. Just make sure I got the buckles there. Come on. That's a screw up. I can clean that. Yep, I've got to stop screwing up. See, obviously due to the awkward angle that I'm attacking this, I've kind of made the edges, highlights of the edges a bit too big. So what I can do is I can adjust those positions later on with another layer of Mephiston red. So I'll do that now. And that should more or less give us the highlights we were after, just by fixing up where the restoring the main colour. Okay, what now? I'm pretty happy with the backpack mostly. Probably should quickly do the antenna. I was thinking about making the antenna actual metal, or metallic rather, but I'm kind of like going as much painted metal as I can. So I'll just chip it a bit once I get up to that stage. There we go. Okay, there's also some bits, knobbly bits in the back here which are difficult to get to. So I'm just going to touch the top of them with the highlight brush. I'm not going to try and do it properly. Just quickly sketch in some highlights at the back, which I'm screwing up. Okay, let's quickly fix them up. I'm happy with the way this guy's turning out. Even without the chipping, I'm quite impressed with the color scheme. This was just me picking things at random from more or less what was already on my bench from my previous project, and just what I generally thought would look good. So yeah, again, sorry about painting these guys. They're quite boring when you like batching them out 10 at a time. I'll keep that. I'll try and save these guys for the middle of the week and just do single miniatures on stream. That makes good Twitch, I think. A quick project you can see come to form up from start to finish, I think. So just quickly touch the tops. Okay, I think that'll do. Oh yeah, there's that control box looking thing which needs to be highlighted. Now you'll notice that I haven't bothered with certain parts, because, like, you know, this raised trim on the helmet. This is because I know that I'll be hitting most of this with metallics anyway, so highlighting it at this stage seems like kind of pointless. Just as I didn't highlight the Mechanicus symbol, this is because I'm going to repaint this with the proper, you know, color scheme when it comes to the detailing phase, which is generally the very last thing I do for a model. Okay, so lost my train of thought. I don't think it needs a... Yeah, I'm not going to bother with an extreme highlight. So I'm just going to move right on. Yep, I missed his arm. So he's got a metal plate on the glove. I'll make sure my paint is actually thin, not runny, and just pick out some of the raised edges on this side as well. Okay, and we're done. So that is the red mostly done. We can move on. So don't need the purple, that's not going to work out for us. I'll keep the Cantor blue around because I will be using that for the rest of these guys. What now? Oh yeah, I forgot that part. Never mind. Okay, now we're done. Let's move on to the bodysuit. So we're not using Inky by Darkness as well, that can go back in the box. Okay, so we have our base color. First highlight, second highlight. How long have I been online so far? Less than an hour. Go to about 4, I reckon. And I should make a move and start getting ready for working tomorrow. Actually play some games and relax. Okay, so let's get some brown on the palette. Get that thinned out. Yeah, what a mess. Okay, so we'll get our finest brush because the area we're going to be touching is relatively small. So we'll start by just emphasizing some folds in the cloak around the legs. So you want to leave most of this area in shade because, yeah, it's in the recesses of the cloak, so most of it's in shadow. Now for the upper glove type area, we'll just paint lines basically where the leather, or whatever material it is, starts to pinch and roll up, and also along the fingers. Okay, that's pretty easy. We'll do the same for this one. And we're good. So let's just move right along. Our next colour, a highlight colour, Scrag Brown. And we'll just get some on the palette. And just identify some high highlights and lay them in. Just be very careful about it. Generally run the highlight colour along the fingers and the thumb. Up here as well. Okay. Finally, Deathclaw Brown for our final highlight. Just gonna put a few winks on the trousers, a little bit more focused on the upper areas on the gloves, and pick out some of the bony joints on the fingers and the thumb. There we go. It's the leather bodysuit, fully highlighted. So the colours that we haven't highlighted yet are the black hoses, and for that we'll grab Eshin Grey, which is a very just grey colour. Not sure what it's based on. This is the closest thing I think GW has to a truly neutral grey. Okay, and we will get a sliver on the brush and start running it along the black hoses. Okay, they're mostly picked out already. So for this longer one, we'll just run it down the entire length And there we go. We're done. Actually, no, there's a couple in between his legs there for some weird reason. Okay. Now, in terms of other colours remaining, we've got the purity seals, which need you, and you two. So, let's start with that. We'll get our Xandri dust for the parchment. Just lace them down on the palette. Like for a wet palette, this does dry out quite quickly. It's not a great wet palette. My homemade solution here. Just run the colour down. The parchment. And also don't forget the little parchment piece under the leg, though we won't hit that a lot. Okay, so while that's drying, it won't take long. I'm not going to bother to reapply the Screamer Pink, since the seals are so small. What I'm going to do is just get our highlight for it, and make sure it's actually thinned but not uncontrollable. And just quickly apply the highlights. And just try and get at that other one in the legs. Just hit a very small part of it. And finally, we'll highlight the edges of the parchment with your shanty bone. I think I might cut this video into a YouTube tutorial. Alright, that's looking pretty good. Of course, the supply on the palette's a bit thin. And finally, just a little bit of a highlight around there. Just carefully work it in. Alright. And we are done. We're rapidly approaching done for a large chunk of this thing at any rate. Alright, so now would be a good time to actually take a break. And I screwed up. You see that? That's a mistake. So we'll just quickly redo the lot of it. Yep. So we'll wait for that red to dry and then reapply the highlights. So picking up where let's just make sure this is working. Yeah. Picking up where I left off from last time, we have our Skitarii, who is a test miniature for a larger army, and we're going to continue working on him. So I've already done all of the main base colours. Now we're going to start working on the metallics. So to start with, I've been having a think about how I want to do this. So I'm going to do this in a couple of stages. I'll get an additional colour that we'll need, chrome. Yeah, so to start with, we'll get a brush. I'm going to do the blade, pure pale burnt metal, highlight with chrome. Well, very glint highlight rather. It's slightly different from edge highlighting. All of the other metallic components, they're going to be gunmetal with glint highlights of pale burnt metal. And some of the trim we're going to do in first copper as an underpaint, then gold, then highlight with chrome. So let's get started. Now I want to be especially careful with this part of the paint job, because if I get any on the already painted areas, that's a mistake I'll have to go back and clean up. So let's get started. Now the colour I am using are the Vallejo Air Metallics. They are some of the best in the business. They're also some of the most liquid in the business, so be careful. These will run on you if you let them. Anyway. There we go. So one coat should be sufficient. I just have to make sure I get it fairly even. And due to it being a white undercoat, it should still be pretty bright, which is good for us. But yeah, see how easy this goes on with one coat. These definitely are the best metallics I've ever used. Well, the best for layering at any rate. For edge highlighting, I'm not as happy, so I might actually retract that. I might not use the chrome. Instead, I'll use something else, another particularly bright metallic, like, say, this metallic medium, perhaps, for extreme highlights, or just simply, if I can find it. It's gone. Well, Ironbreaker or whatever bright metallic I happen to have nearby, because due to the slightly more clumpy nature, they're easier to control. And therefore, they make better for highlighting, I find, and for edging. But yeah, you really want to make sure your paint is thin on the brush with these paints, otherwise they'll run everywhere and make a mess. Okay, there we go. Just be sure to work it in. And move along. Now I'm also leaving these cartridge things in this revolver type assembly white, or at least I'm trying to, because I am going to try to do some glow effects on them later on. So to do that, what I'll do is I'll go back over with white to establish a solid white as the base of my glow. Then I'll use some GW washes to try and get a subtle effect. Nothing fancy, just something that's easy and it works. That's looking good so far. See, I've been thinking about how I'm going to do paint streaming and what actually works. I think for video production in general, it's best to keep focused on a topic rather than paint a whole, well, when I say a topic, as in a whole mini from start to finish. It's not great jumping from project to project. You want to provide some continuity. I suppose this is me just thinking out loud for what I'm going to do in future. So yeah, I've been thinking about changing up the way I'm going to engage with this hobby. So in future, that'll be a lot less far fewer eye projects and more single miniatures. So yeah, I have been selling off some stuff which I'll never get to, so hopefully I'll eventually get my plastic pile down to something manageable. And then I can start picking and choosing projects without worrying about getting things on the table or not. Alright, so that's just about done for the base coat for the pistol. So I'll leave that and go on to other things. Now the blade I'm going to leave behind. So instead let's do some of the metal bits and rivets and piping and stuff. Anyway. Because yeah, this stuff is great. Just look at the way it runs into the crevices on that pipe. And I'll come back with a bit a less runny metallic to give it a highlight. I'm not even going to wash it really, because look how dark that metallic is. I'm just going to highlight it, and then we're going to call it done. I'm only going to try to do a gradual shade on the blade once I get around to it, and I'll do that with black glazes, or at least I'll try. I've never been able to do it right. I have to be careful here because this thing butts up right against the cloak. This is the part where steady hand and patience really pays off. And you don't even need to necessarily hit everything, just enough to cover every part that can be visible to the naked eye. It saves time. So yeah, it's been a while since I last streamed. Last weekend I was busy. I just don't remember exactly with what. Actually, that looks like a bit of black piping there, which on the attaching the camera, which I should get later on. So there's another bit of metallic tubing there on his shoulder. And there is one also running all the way around his waist, but before we move on to that, let's just do a quick 360 to make sure there's any other bits we need to hit. Well, there's a white pipe between his legs down there. I'm not going to bother to try and get at the back because that'd be ridiculous. Alright, now he has got this pipe wrapping the entirety of his body, so let's get that. And it's going to be tricky because it's obviously partially covered by the limbs. Alright, and I did screw up a bit there. While hitting that pipe, I also got the edge of the purity seal, so what I'll do is I'll be touch dry very quickly, find my Ypsilanti bone and quickly clean that up. So I'm just going to throw a little bit on my palette. Just make sure we've thinned it, but not too thin. And just quickly ding it like that, and we're good. Alright, so that is the first metallic colour on everything, and while we're at it, I'm also going to hit that pipe because it's annoying me. Excuse me. And that is done. Okay, so pop, and this is our pale burnt metal. So what I'm going to do with this is just get a fair bit of it on the brush. I just want to run it up and down the sword. Now this will take multiple layers because it's a much thinner paint in order to get our even coverage. So you can see the way it beads. It's a really metallic paint. A really liquid paint, rather. So just keep spreading it until it starts to evenly coat. It's a little hair on there, I think. Oh no. Oh well. It's also a relatively thin metallic, so some of the undercolor will show through. The undercoat, rather, which is good for trying to achieve that level of shading and highlighting, because you can't really highlight metallics just by layering up a brighter metallic. You have to use inks to do it. It's something I've never been good at, and something I've been trying to get good at, or get better at, rather. Yeah, so that's... I'm going to need to put 2 layers on that guy, so we'll let him dry for a bit. So in the meantime, I'm going to get our copper. And try and hit all of the trim on his helmet. Okay, and this is the genuinely hard part, because you'll want to be careful, because the paint can run here, and if it runs, it'll go over onto the red we've already painted. And if that happens, we'll have to go back and fix it, and I don't want to have to do that. Also have to be careful not to touch the parts of the model that are still drying. See there, those parts are connected. I'll also paint that front visor in copper. Oh, and there's some tubing on his face mask that I missed. I'll come back with the dark metallic and get him. Okay. There we go. I might also darken up the vision slot with a thin layer of black paint. Some very thin black paint to make sure it gets in the recesses. There it is. It's quite difficult to get in there right now, so just take a step back and actually look at the model for a moment. Just sort of, when you find yourself straining and you're worried you might make a mistake, odds are you will. The best thing to do is take a step back and just look at the model, blink, look at something in the distance to reset your vision. Might also do his back plates in copper as well. Okay, that looks good. Of course, it's difficult to get in there. Okay, so that's looking good. I even think one layer of copper is sufficient. You don't need to... missed a spot. So yeah, I think one layer of copper is sufficient. And before we move on, no, we don't want any more copper. What we want to do is put another layer of pale burnt metal on the sword directly, so get some of it, thin it, just run it along, just to make sure we've got an even coat of metallics on the blade. Just make sure I'm not leaving any bubbles or hairs as well. Okay, that's good. Alright, let's proceed. We'll do the hilt of the sword. Alright, we'll start with copper. Or hilt and pommel, I suppose. Just try to layer it fairly thinly without going over any of the metallics on the sword blade. Also, I need to remind myself to go back and put a material colour on that grip. It's hard to get to, so it's a thing I frequently forget, and in all honesty, in a lot of cases, wouldn't even be noticed if I missed it on the tabletop. Okay. So I guess while we're here, I'll do the grip. Over that, we'll get a bit of Stegadon scale green. Same colour as the robe. I usually do this because it's easier than getting another colour. Because another colour in the model is another colour that you have to shade and highlight, and yeah, it's easier to use something you already have a colour for. Okay, so you can't really see it, but I'm doing alright. That'll do. Once it's dry, I'll hit it with some shade, and then I'll re-highlight it, and we're good. Alright, so we've also got this circuitry type thing. I think it's a power sword, so what we'll do is we'll layer that in copper as well. Again, being careful not to go stray too far onto the blade. Okay, that's good. And on the other side. Excellent. So, as I mentioned, we did miss out on a few pipes because there are a lot of them on this model. So we got these pipes on his face mask, which will just hit with a bit of the metallic. Okay. And we have another one here with this, I don't know, this thing looks like one of those, like lift controls. I don't know why it's on his backpack. Maybe Admech soldiers have an autonomous mode that you control with that thing. Would seem like a liability on the battlefield, but who am I to judge the magnificence of the Omnissiah? Anyway. I'll just quickly... hit that and work our way around slowly until we reach the part where we can't get at it anymore. And we're done. So, One thing I will do, I don't know if it's worth painting those tubes, because like they're already highlighted as part of the metallics, but I don't know if they should get another colour. I'm not gonna, because it's hard work, and I like minimizing the amount of hard work I have to do. So, now, I think the metallics on the sword hilt are sufficiently dry that we can go to our second layer. I'm just gonna close everything up. We'll get out our gold. And what we're going to do is get some gold on the brush and go back over the copper of the hilt and the pommel. But we're going to leave the conductive piece the copper colour. And the best part is, it doesn't matter too much if you don't get into all the crevices. That's part of the reason why we painted the copper, because that will act as a slight shade, which is generally ideal for this point. Okay. Alright. Okay. So that is the metallic sketched in. So let's have a think about highlighting. Well, you know what? I'll be back in a moment. I'm going to raid my big box of Vallejo model color. Alright, so should really add these to my permanent rack, but we've got here a Vallejo model color, natural steel and silver. Now these will be highlights for the darker metallics and the lighter metallics respectively once we're done. Have I got my gunmetal on the rack? Nah, that's for completeness sake. I'm going to grab that bottle of gunmetal. Alright, so that's that taken care of. Now, let's start with some attempted shading. So I'm going to try something I haven't done in a while, more to the point, haven't attempted in a while. We're going to try some blending. So, excuse me. Get out some Vallejo model color black, thoroughly mix, or shake rather. Just pop a little bit on the palette. I'm not going to thin it. And I'm going to have two brushes. The smaller one I'm going to hold in my teeth and it's going to be damp, but it's not going to have any paint. This one I'm going to use to apply the paint, so you won't be able to hear me talk for a minute. This could all end in failure as well, so bear that in mind. Then, while that's drying, we work our way into it and then drag it out with the brush. And if we get parts where we don't want it, there we go. And we repeat as necessary. Let's do this again. Get a bit more. On the handle, and work quickly before it starts to dry. Take the colour and work it out. That's looking pretty good. It's a subtle effect, but it works. So let's do that. Take the colour, slap it on, get our application brush, work it in and out. We might have done a bit too much there, but we can keep blending it until we're happy with it. Okay. I think I might have overdone it a bit, but oh well. So we can just put a little bit more in, and we won't take it out too far this time. And work it back like that to get more of a gradation going. And you'll notice we're really messing up that that copper, but that's fine. We'll come back to that and relayer it. Let's do the other side. Shit. Ugh. Let's make sure we get it even on the blade. That's looking pretty good. I'm also going to put a little bit of it on the top and not as much. I need to recharge my black. I think I want to go about 1/3 of the way with this one, because obviously most of the light is hitting up the top. Alright. So that's looking relatively okay, and we only wanted to do this as a quick job anyway. So I'll do the underside a bit more, I think. This time we'll add a bit of glaze medium to make it thinner. Just a hint. That's a bit up the top, so we'll just wipe that away. Okay. It's looking good. So I'll make our black even thinner with some water. And we'll do it a bit more broad, but a bit very thin across the entirety of the blade, just to blend the shades into each other. Alright, I say it's looking good. So, what I'm going to do next, make sure our brushes aren't getting in the way, is relayer that copper on the mechanical doodad on the sword. My paint's blocked. One moment while I figure this out. There we go. That's better. Okay. Now I generally use these Vallejo Air Metallics at least when layering, when base coating them unthinned, because they are a very, very thin paint by themselves. So you shouldn't need to thin it all. And if you do, odds are you'll just get color separation, and it's not a good scene. Pigment separation, I suppose. Also, don't use your good brushes with these. I'm using some fairly ratty and old Winsor & Newtons, which I've ruined. Because these are like mica flakes in the paint. They're like, as I've heard other painters describe them, tiny razor blades that will shred your fine Kolinsky sable. And apparently those brushes are inhumane to make, so you'd want to, minimize your use of them. Expensive to boot. Okay. So that is done. And while I've got this black, what I would do is I'll pick up a little bit of it, make sure it's even thinner, and just go for the eye slot. There we go, that makes him a little more distinctive. Could do a Cylon type thing, with a single glowing red eye in the middle. That seems like effort. Okay. So, for the rest of the metallics, I'm fairly imaginative. Reikland Flesh Shade, Agrax Earth Shade, and we'll let those dry for a minute. Because, yeah, I generally find it's best to wait a little while before attempting to use the use washes on freshly applied metallics. If you don't, they tend to separate, and it's not good. So what we'll do is we'll get our natural steel, shake it like a Polaroid picture. Actually, before we do, though, we'll just get some of our glaze and just find a few key spots to add a little bit more shade to this gun. Okay. And there. Alright, so that'll probably take a minute to dry. So in the meantime, you'll just get some of our... Yeah, that's separated nicely. Let's make sure that's all shook. And on the palette. So So I wasn't entirely sure if this would necessarily work. That is a bit lighter than our gunmetal. So just thin it out just a hint. Make sure it's thin. And we'll just run it along the ribs of these metallic bits and pieces and pick them out as best we can. I swore I had some lighter metallics in my collection. Might be worth going straight for the silver, but I want to avoid that if possible. Alright, so let's put on our get our Reichland Flesh Shade. I'm not sure if these highlights are necessarily working. I'll just I'll have a think about that while I do this chore. And Agrex Earth Shade for the copper bits and pieces. Just make sure we haven't got additional water on the handle and ferrule of the brush. If we do that, it'll run down, mix with the wash, change our consistency mid-work, and that would be a bad time for all involved. Alright. So, yep, the face mask. Now, I'm not really going to do much else to the copper. I'm just going to give a few spot highlights of gold for the copper and some highlights of silver for the gold. Otherwise, that's that for those colours. So I do want them to look fairly beaten and tarnished. Okay, that's looking good so far. Alright, how much more have we got to go? I swear I had more metallics than this. Is this even coming out properly? That looks better. A bit more shiny. Anyway, let's just give that a quick go. Oh yeah, that's definitely better. So just quickly start edging the bits and pieces up here. Just generally painting in downward strokes to, you know, catch the highlights as best we can. So just gonna hit the piping. Just run it gently over the top to get the upper ridges and avoid the recessed areas. Alright, it's starting to look good. Alright, so that is drying. Excuse me. We'll get our silver out and also close up the wash pots, because if I make a mess on camera that would be annoying to clean up. Okay. So, yeah. That's a mess. It's also very thick, but that's fine. We'll just give it some water. It's not separating well. Okay, that'll do. So we only want a very small amount, and just run it along the edges of the sword. Like so. And we'll do the same thing with the center line. I'm sure there's an official, like, sword terminology. All my SEA friends would probably know, but the ridge, I suppose, of the middle of a sword blade, whatever that isn't actually called, we're going to paint that to highlight it a bit. Same thing on the other side. Careful, it's getting a bit too liquid. So just wipe off the excess and go back in. Keep it as subtle as possible. I'm not going to highlight the underside because that would ruin a bit of our shading. Alright, I think that looks okay. And the wash is relatively quick drying, so what we'll do is we'll get our gold and highlight the copper. Just make sure we've got it mixed up to a decent consistency, and just run it along the top of these. Pick out a few bits and pieces, and on the other side. Okay, that'll do. So we'll get his face mask. Got to remember to keep this in frame. Being fairly careful. Just hitting the edges and the rivets and bits and pieces. I think I made a mistake there. Yep, I did. So I'm not happy with the way I did the highlight right on his face, and since it's visible, I'm going to go over and fix it. So the upper highlight I'm fine with, it's the lower one which looks a bit odd, so I'm going to just go back over that with the original copper. Looks alright. Okay, so it's copper but glinting a little bit. That's good. And for our gold, since we got some silver on the palette already, not the best silver, but it'll do, I'll just paint a couple of sharper bits. And around the sword hilt. Okay, looking good. Alright, I'm happy with that. Quite happy, as a matter of fact. So, what else do we need to do on this guy? Let's say we're just about up to the detailing, but first, we've got the grip of the sword. Just a few other bits and pieces, which I should get before moving on. So get some of our Drakenhof Nightshade. And just drop it in there and clear some of the excess. Okay. Yep, we are definitely up to detailing. So what have we got remaining? To be honest, not a lot. We've got the Admech symbol, which has to have its half color scheme painted on. We've got the lens in this camera unit there, and a couple of screens on the back which I'll paint, and also the cylinders on the gun. So since we've been working mostly with metallics for this period, we obviously want to clear that up, because general practice is you don't mix metallic and non-metallic paints. Though whether how serious this is different painters have different opinions. But since I did a lot of metallics, I'm just going to clean up. So you'll hear me shuffling around while I change my water. I'll clear that. Won't even need the paper palette. I'm back in a moment. Alright, I am back with fresh water, fresh towels, and we're ready to go. So, to start with, let's work on the Admech symbol. Actually, let's get our colours together. So we want, for the screens, generally, to get some highlighting done, we're going to use those two, yellow, and our Incubi Darkness. For the Admech symbol, we're going to need Celestra Grey. Sorry. Oh, that's Ulthern Grey. We'll need that as well. So I've got a couple of pots of it. Some of them are in better condition than others. That. We're going to want Batten Black and Dawnstone. So, to start with, let's base coat our Admech symbol. Now we're definitely in the home stretch here, so, and for the lenses we're also going to need some colour. So these two and an off-white will be fine. So we'll just get you some. Honestly, I don't even know why you still use GW paints in a lot of cases. The only one of theirs I really like are their reds, but everything else is often better served by other ranges. I have to remember to paint in frame like that. So I'm just going to run our paint the Admech symbol all over with black. Okay, that'll do. So while that's drying, I'll take our Incubi Darkness. Get it on the palette. And where have we got our view screens? One on the back of the... I don't even think that's a view screen technically. I think it's like a gauge, but I'm going to treat it as a view screen, so I'll just layer over it. And this little one down here as well. Wipe off some excess with our finger. Alright, that's pretty good. Pretty easy. Then we'll get our lens with Calidor Sky. And careful, you will just put it on the lens there. Now, since it's at an odd angle, this one's going to be challenging to paint. Okay. There we go. And, of course, almost forgot, for the glowing effect on the gun, we'll just get our off-white, put on the palette, and just layer over all of our overspill from the metallic work. It's not too thin. There we go. So the metallic should mostly be dried by now. Okay, so he's going to probably... that's a mistake. This is what happens when you don't take it slow, folks. But it's fixable. You just need to quickly get some wet on the brush. Some wet, I mean water. And you just quickly scrub away your mistake. It may leave a little tide mark, but that's fine. We can come back and fix that even more if we feel like it. Might not even be noticeable. Anyway, just work the color a bit more into the recesses. And this will serve as our jumping off point for doing our sort of OSL effect. Well, our easy OSL effect. Largely thanks to the technical advances of Games Workshop, we have a variety of products which make this incredibly easy to do. Like I was taught to do this with actual paints, and just slapping a technical on is orders of magnitude easier. Hell, I couldn't even do it properly with actual paint. Yeah, so I think that's good enough for the layer. All we want is just a white to work off. So, with that done, we'll go back around. So we want to do the Admech cog, so that means we need our Celestra Grey. And I need to make sure I get which side, so I'm just craning my neck to look at my reference photos. I need more on the palette. So, just get some. Make sure it's on camera. And we'll paint one side of the cog with our Celestra Grey. Just paint the demarcating lines first so we know where we're going. Of course, paint is drying very quickly. And this is a small brush, so we'll have to refresh the brush constantly. Looking good. I'm going to paint the opposite side of the skull like that. And that's our Admech symbol, or at least the first pass. Now it's too small to really shade, so what we'll do with that is we'll just give it highlights and call it a day. Moving on, we will get our Warpstone Glow. I haven't got a lot left, so we'll get a more brutalized brush and use that to get it out of the pot. Note to self, need to buy more warpstone glow. Okay. So make sure it's fairly thin. And we'll just paint the edges of each screen so you can see what I'm doing. I'm just going to paint a line along the tops, top and bottom, and along the side. And here we're just going to paint a line because it's a very small screen. Okay, it's barely detectable, which is ideal. Next up is the lens. We're going to get our Techless blue here. On the palette you go. And I'm just going to paint a crescent on the upper left and lower right portions of the lens. Try not to let them touch. I've never been good at doing gem effects, so we'll just do. Okay, so the white is, let's give the white another layer, especially the topmost surfaces, because we've still got some of the original colour showing through. Like that. Very good. And that'll take a bit to dry. Alright, so I'm moving at a brief, steady clip, so we'll start highlighting the Admech cog. We'll get our Ulthen Grey, just a little bit on the palette. And what we'll do is we'll just tip the edges of the cog. And also highlight the skull. Okay. And we'll get our Dawnstone. And we'll just tip the edges of the cog on the black side. And highlight the skull on the other. That'll do for highlighting. Okay. So, final stage for highlighting. We've got our off-white on the palette from the cylinder assembly. So we'll just quickly put a dot in the top left crescent on the lens. And say it's done. And the screens. Get some mood green. Sorry. And just paint sort of an L shape in the top left corner of the larger screen, and just put a small line about halfway along in the bottom one. And while we're here, we'll also finish the entire thing off with just a dot of yellow excuse me, on the top left screen of the screen on both. That should provide a slight digital layout effect. Or the, what's the term? Monochrome? Not monochrome. I forget it. Anyway, so yeah, it's coming along pretty well. Yeah, one more effect. Since I want a very fine colour, I'm going to get, well, first of all, I'm going to need some just regular Mephiston red. Let's grab this one and hopefully it's of a better consistency. It'll do. Mr. Throwing your brush everywhere. Alright. So, I'll just take some red and... shit, what was I doing with this? Oh yeah, purity seals. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to, in the very top left corner, just sketch in some larger capital letters on the purity seals. Now that's done. And get our German grey. Now I'm using Vallejo paints for this one because Vallejo paints are generally more finer than GW, and they thin out better. They make excellent text, or excellent for like fine detail work. So the only reason I'm not using like Vallejo paints, especially the model color paints for everything, is they're harder to color match, and they're often they don't quite have the color range that GW has. Anyway, we'll just sketch in some little lines along each purity seal, like so. Just try to, you know, let your hand jiggle a bit so to give the impression of text. Okay. Now there's also one on his foot which you can't easily reach, but we'll just put some little lines there as well. It's starting to dry. Like so. Alright, so all that remains is the OSL and the base. Now for the base, I will don't need any of this anymore. We need our deepest base, flat earth and dark sand, though I honestly doubt, I might just do the base offline. So yeah, to explain what I will do, the base will be first layered with black brown, pretty thick and thinned out, so it really soaks into the grit that we use to base this thing. Then we'll overbrush with flat earth to give our intermediate tone. Then we'll dry brush with dark sand. Once that's done, we will paint the rocks German grey first, again thin and watery to really get in there. Overbrush with neutral grey, then fine highlight with sky grey, and that looks pretty good. And then all you need to do is like put on your static grass, and then you're done. So, but I'll do that off camera because this step especially takes a long time to dry, so I usually leave that overnight. But in the meantime, let's quickly do work on this one. So the stuff I'm using is, you may have seen this if you've been following GW stuff, Hex Wraith Flame. This is basically just glaze medium, but a little, obviously in more quantity and a little thicker. So you want to treat this somewhat as a wash. Just simply on the brush and run it over the white and let it pull in the recesses, because when doing OSL lighting, the outer edges need to be bright, and the inner need to be the glow color. So this will probably take a couple of layers to get right. But yeah, like, as much as GW deserves a lot of hate for many of the things that they do and have done in the past, some of their attempts to make these sorts of effects easier are certainly praiseworthy. So we can actually be quite heavy with it. And this is even fine if we like edged some of the metallics. It just looks like a glow effect is reflecting onto the gun. And we can even let it overspill a bit, so we'll just dampen it down and just run some of the green onto the metallics, and it'll tint it slightly. And let's make sure it doesn't get in the edges of the metallics. There we go. Alright, It's a very, very cheap and effective OSL glow effect. So, I think we're just about done with this chap. Yeah, I'm pretty happy with the way this has turned out. So, the idea of this guy is that here's my test model for a small kill team. You know, actually this kill team that came in the official kill team box set. So I've got them assembled next to me, and since obviously batch painting armies really does not work for a video format, I'll do those on my own time. And if you're actually watching this and if you care, you can enjoy this guy as my template for how I'm going to go about basically doing an entire Admech kill team, and possibly even expand it out to an army. Though quite frankly at this point it's unlikely.